Okay. So as a reminder, we do have a genetic counselor or counselors from CHOP here. And if you would like to speak to somebody about your genetic report, a representative is sitting at or next to the registration table. So please, at any time, go visit with them. They are filling time slots. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to have a conversation with them if you're interested. So please do speak with somebody if you are interested and have access to your genetic report. Okay. So Sydney is an advocate among us who very acutely understands the urgent need for high-level researchers, clinicians, physicians to work on research and treat our patients. She is the liaison between SRF and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and is going to share now more about that partnership.
This time last year, we were sitting in a similar room as this in Nashville, and it's hard to believe, but IND did not exist at that point. It was only a couple months later, I think February of 2023, so that's just this year, that I was scrolling through Twitter and saw this ginormous, humongous, monumental announcement that CHOP was going to begin the IND program and had received a massive grant to do so. That is an amazing asset to our community. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it and hopefully encourage those of you who haven't attended yet to go. So since the press release in 2023 and since IND has begun at CHOP, which is the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, they have set a very rigorous goal of having 100 of our Syngapians show up in person to partake in their studies and to not only provide data that will be really important to the study, but for our patients to be able to walk away with maybe some new ideas or some next steps that they can take from one of maybe the most knowledgeable team, I believe, in the entire United States about SYNGAP1. So far, as they shared with us yesterday, they've seen 38 of our patients in a clinic, and I'm not sure there's anywhere else that can actually say that they have seen 38 of our patients in person. All different ages are represented, as well as both male and females. What's really important about CHOP is prior to IND becoming what it is today, SRF had really focused a lot on studying the science of the gene itself, funding basic science, and we had not been able to invest much in the clinical part that will make treatments available to our children. CHOP has altered that course forever by creating the IND program and having so many of our children come to have their data collected, which will be represented in the natural history study, and that information is going to be what makes it possible for treatments that are developed to be put into our children. That's to say nothing, of course, about all of the translational research, which is also happening at CHOP. While you are visiting the clinic and having your child seen by their multidisciplinary comprehensive team, there are scientists just a few hallways away who are working on actual treatments, drugs that can be put into the bodies of our children to help relieve them of the symptoms of SYNGAP1. CHOP is also amazing because they're working with us to help draw information and resources from things that SRF has already invested in. So for instance, our data from Ciitizen has been really important in them analyzing medical records and having data beyond just what they collect in the clinic. Some of you have maybe already participated in the disease concept model interviews. This is just simply a way of saying somebody's going to interview you, ask you about your experiences as a caregiver of somebody with SYNGAP1, and they're going to use the things that you say to make sure that when you are seen in the clinic, they're asking the right questions and measuring the right things so that those data points can be included in their development of the natural history of SYNGAP1. As Mike mentioned yesterday, By partnering with CHOP in this way, by being proactive about sending our patients there, we're actually contributing to the next generation of scientists who are going to be seeing our children when we are too old. So Julie and others who represented the younger next generation of scientists yesterday, maybe they'll be the ones who are seeing your Syngapian siblings when they are taking them to a clinic in the future. It's really important because when we're, older and not able to do everything that we would love to for our Syngapians, other people will be responsible for them, and we certainly want them to be seeing scientists and clinicians who have been seeing our children for many years. Also importantly, I want you to know that CHOP and SRF are both invested and looking forward to a time when CHOP's program, when END, is not just existing in Philadelphia. I know that it's kind of a FOMO point if you are not a Philadelphia or Pennsylvania resident to say that you're very far away and you can't get to this. And everybody in here, both SRF and the CHOP team, are aware that high quality and compassionate care for our Syngap patients doesn't exist all over the country. And we really want this to be accessible to families because so many of us are constantly in and out of crisis mode and truly need interventions from people who have seen many, many of our children and know what they are like. Finally, I have a couple of announcements for you. International patients, I'm not sure if there are any represented. Okay, great, awesome, so I'll keep talking. International patients, the most recent news from CHOP is please, if you haven't already, send them an email. It's CHOP, or END, E-N-D-D, at chop.edu. They want to hear from you, and they want to see your patients. They do have a mechanism to try to help with the cost for this, but it really is kind of on a case-by-case basis. So reach out to them. They want to hear about your child, how old they are, and where they are, and they'll begin the process with you from there of hopefully making it possible for you to come to Philadelphia and have your loved one be seen. I also want to let you know that SRF has a travel assistance program. We've made several grants out to families to be able to come and participate in the study where they may not have been able to without that money. So if you are traveling by land, if $500 from SRF would be the difference between you coming and not coming, please make sure that you email me because we want to make sure that that doesn't stand in your way. If you're coming by air, whether you're in the USA or internationally, you're also welcome to email me because if $1,000, which is what we can reimburse up to, would stand in your way from coming, we don't want that to be the case. Please email me, and we want to make sure that that can help make it possible for you. My email is sydney@syngap1.org. Finally, I just want to say one more time that CHOP has graciously offered to talk to people who have questions about their genetic reports. So maybe if you're newly diagnosed or you have something on your genetic report that you feel hasn't been adequately explained to you, you're definitely welcome to chat with them about it, and they're available at the table right outside the doors. All right, so now I have the privilege of introducing to you somebody from the CHOP team. Sarah Tefft is a certified registered nurse practitioner in the Division of Neurology and Pediatric Epilepsy at CHOP. She is part of the END clinic. She's part of the Epilepsy Neurogenetics clinic. She's also part of the Keto clinic. And for me personally, she was the person who I sent a lot of emails to when my child went through CHOP's ketogenic program. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Tefft to the stage.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks you so much for inviting me to talk today. So I'm Sarah Tefft. I work at CHOP, like many of us who are here right now. And I'm going to talk about keto today, which is maybe like my first love of when I was introduced to neurology. So I don't have anything to disclose. So today we'll talk about the history of the ketogenic diets a little bit, just because I think it's interesting. We'll review the different types of ketogenic diets, because there's not just one, and then go over some of the short and long-term side effects, which are something that I think I comment on a ton in like the ENDD clinic for other people. And I think we do a really good job of helping those side effects at CHOP. So the history of the ketogenic diet actually starts back with Hippocrates, who is the father of modern medicine. He has a whole works on the sacred disease, which is actually about epilepsy, and noted that when people were fasting, they would have less seizures. And then it was in 1921, Dr. Russell Wilder of the Mayo Clinic said, how do we get this fasting state? Because fasting is not sustainable, obviously. So he came up with a high-fat diet and was able to achieve ketosis, and then people were becoming seizure-free. It fell out of favor when more medications became on the market, and then came back into favor with, I think, really Charlie, which we'll talk about the Charlie Foundation a little bit, probably in the early 90s. I do like to add here, Dr. Bergfest is our medical director of our program, and in 2005, she did a randomized clinical trial saying that you do not have to start with fasting to start a ketogenic diet. You can absolutely start at a lower ratio and then gradually increase over time. So I think that's important to note, because your child does not need to suffer and fast to get to that point. So does keto work? It does. It definitely works. We wouldn't keep using it if it didn't work. So the classical ketogenic diet, this is pulled from a Cochrane review. Classical, up to 55% are seizure-free after 3 months, and then up to 85% had a seizure reduction. Use of the modified ketogenic diet, up to 25% became seizure-free, and there was an up to 60% seizure reduction. I did want to highlight patient selection. This is from the consensus statement for keto from 2018. So on table 1, you can see Doza syndrome, epilepsy with myoclonic atonic seizures. Some kids with SYNGAP do have that. It's very efficacious keto using that. On the other side, it was pointed out that it wasn't necessarily more efficacious than other things, but it does point out Lennox-Gastaut. I'm very interested in being able to pull out the data of how helpful keto is specifically for SYNGAP, so hopefully I can have some information on that in a year. There are contraindications to starting a ketogenic diet. So we all know that if your kid is going on the diet, we know why they have epilepsy, they have SYNGAP. It is important to make sure, though, that they don't have any of these underlying metabolic conditions, because this would indicate that they can't handle a high-fat diet, and could actually be really troublesome if they were started on it. So we usually just make sure that these are all done before you start. This is something that should be done across all programs. So what are ketogenic diets? So ketogenic diets are the amount of fat, and then the ratio part is, the other part is protein plus carbohydrate. So when we talk about 4-to-1, it's 4 parts fat, the 1 part is the protein plus carb. And then I love this picture. This kid started keto, and he has like bacon pancakes for Halloween, so I had to throw it on. He's still on keto. So how does keto work? We really have no idea. There are a ton of proposed mechanisms out there, but the gist of it is that you reduce your carbohydrates. This reduces your blood glucose. It decreases the amount of insulin that your body is producing. And then your liver then turns all that extra fat into fuel. And then the fuel is generated as ketones, and then the brain uses your ketones for energy, for the majority of it, instead of glucose. There's something about the brain and ketones, the brain usually likes it. These are some proposed mechanisms of action of how the ketogenic diet works. The top ones are kind of older mechanisms of action, and the bottom ones are newer ones that have been proposed. It probably is working on all of these different channels and different mechanisms, because it works for so many different types of epilepsies, and it's not just one thing. And keto can be used for other disorders as well. So what's the composition of a ketogenic diet? So our American diet is about 55% carbohydrate, 20 to 30% fat, 15 to 20% protein. A classical ketogenic diet is 90% fat, 3% carbohydrate, and 7% protein. A modified ketogenic diet, which is about a 2-to-1 ratio, is 3 to 10% carbohydrate, 20 to 40% protein, so it's significantly more protein than a classical ketogenic diet. And then the fat is 60 to 70%. And then you have your low glycemic index treatments. All of the carbohydrates have to be a glycemic index of less than 50, which I'll touch on. So what does the difference look like? So at CHOP, we are very fortunate. We have a medical chef educator. So these are all of her pizzas that she put together. So you can see on the left is our classical ketogenic diet. You can still have a yummy pizza with all of that fat in there. It is 90% fat. You can see that it's actually extra crispy from all of the mayo that's in it, but which is actually kind of nice because I think a lot of keto kids miss that crunch because there's so much fat in the diet. And then you can see a 3-to-1 ratio is about 87% fat, 82% fat for a 2-to-1, and then a modified ketogenic diet is about 75% fat. So you get significantly more broccoli because of the carbohydrate. So classical ketogenic diet. I think almost the majority of centers, CHOP does things a little bit differently, of course they do. So we do an inpatient initiation for classical ketogenic diet. We bring families in, we admit them to the hospital because there are a lot of side effects that can happen with the diet. They stay overnight. It's also a teaching admission. We're very fortunate. We have a keto kitchen. It's the first keto kitchen in the country. So the families are actually able to come to the keto kitchen, come with our medical chef, and prepare meals, and then feed those meals to their children during the admission. Not all of the meals look super yummy. Like breakfast the first day of starting it is not going to be from the kitchen, but you get to kind of get that experience over time then. And then there's tons of training that goes in place. So for a classical ketogenic diet, everything is weighed to 1/10 of a gram on this like scientific scale. And fat is the main source of the calories. It's super precise, but we will update calories as needed for your child as they continue to grow. And then also, like if your child has like 3 meals, 2 snacks at home, we will make their ketogenic diet be that as well for their meal plan. It will be 3 meals and 2 snacks. Can be super delicious. These are all classical ratio foods, and they all look like carbohydrates to me, but they're actually not. So it can be super yummy. The cupcake is really popular. The top of it is heavy whipping cream, of course, but they're all delicious, actually. So a modified ketogenic diet, you can use household measurements. So some families want this option. We also allow families to use a lot more of the store brands that are out there because keto is such a fad diet right now. And the modified ketogenic diet, our program for the classical ketogenic diet, we don't use net carbohydrates actually. For a modified ketogenic diet, you can do net carbohydrates. So net carbohydrates are taking the total amount of carbohydrate in something, and then you're allowed to subtract the fiber. So if you eat more fibrous foods, you kind of get more carbs snuck in a little bit. A low glycemic index treatment, I think more adults probably do this than children, but so a glycemic index is anything under 50 for when you're using this treatment. So things that have a low glycemic index, you want to think about like your green vegetables, grapefruit, avocado, which is still a carb, quinoa, those are things that are a lower glycemic index. Things that are like a higher glycemic index you would have to avoid are like white rice, donuts, cakes, things like that. There's also the MCT oil diet. So this is much more liberalized. Medium chain triglycerides produce ketones more easily than long chain triglycerides. So less fat is actually needed on this diet. And this actually allows for more carbohydrates and protein to be used. We do recommend that the MCT oil be split up evenly between all the meals. We usually start with a slower titration up of MCT oil because it can cause GI distress. Like diarrhea and like upset stomach. So we usually increase slowly over time. Other measures of success, this is probably my favorite part about the diet. A lot of times, even during keto week, we'll see kids just become like more alert. One of my favorite stories is one girl who started the diet the last day. Mom had said that like she had stopped playing with her toys the last day. She was making great eye contact. She started playing with her toys again. And this is all before we started to see seizures reduce. So we can see increased alertness with keto, improved sleep, improved learning ability. A lot of times I'll hear families saying like PT and OT are just raving about how much better they're doing. There can be positive behavioral changes as well. And overall, a lot of families say there's an improvement in their quality of life. So some short-term side effects, these are typically seen when we're initiating the ketogenic diet because the body has to make that metabolic switch to be using ketones instead of glucose. So hypoglycemia is something we can see, low blood glucose. This is usually treated with some carbs and until the body kind of adjusts, and then we can take those away. Acidosis is a huge one, which I'll go into. Nausea, vomiting, a lot of times that's from the acidosis. Lethargy, kind of that keto flu that usually goes away in about 2 weeks. Loss of appetite, it is like eating a Thanksgiving meal for every single meal just because fat is heavy. Diarrhea and constipation can happen, dehydration if they don't really want to eat or drink, and weight loss can happen then obviously if you're not really eating. So I really wanted to highlight this because I hear so much that the Syngapians just really go into ketosis really quick. Not sure why, but hopefully we find out one day. So if you go back to your high school chemistry class, you think about your pH scale. So our blood likes to be a little bit more alkaline than neutral. When your body is making ketones, ketones are an acid. So as the level of ketosis increases, the more acid that's going around in your blood system, and then this causes metabolic acidosis. This can be treated. And also kidneys are immature. These are things that would help to filter out everything, and the body just needs extra help. So we do this by using potassium citrate citric acid or potassium citrate. The majority of the time, we'll actually give our patients a starter dose of this medication, or more like a tasting dose. It is a little bit sour, so we allow our kids to get used to the flavor of it before they actually then have to come in for the diet, have another huge change to their life, and then it will be more critical that they actually get the full dose of it. We have tons of recipes. Our pharmacy has allowed us to get these medications so we can do taste testing. Our medical chef has actually helped us come up with recipes to make it taste better. So what can you use? The potassium citrate citric acid is the liquid. The potassium citrate extended release tablets you can use as long as you can swallow them whole. You could also use a potassium bicarbonate, potassium citrate, which is kind of like an Alka-Seltzer that you put in water and then can drink. Long-term side effects of the diet. So elevated cholesterol can happen. This actually, there are reports, it typically happens in the first 6 months, but then we usually see it dip back down to normal levels over time. A lot of times sound would be like, oh yeah, like they're eating like a ton of bacon, like why would you not? But then that's a ton of saturated fat, and then we have to cut back on that sometimes. If the triglycerides are high, we'll start a fish oil supplement if we need to. Osteopenia is a big side effect. We have to supplement a lot with the diet, so we get a baseline DEXA scan or a baseline bone age, and just make sure that kids are using their standards if they need them, and making sure that their bone health is where we want it to be. So these are kind of all clumped together. Constipation is a huge side effect of the ketogenic diet. There's not a lot of fiber because there's not a lot of carbohydrates. So the majority of kids are on Miralax, and usually, I think one thing we recommend that has been really helpful is actually to weigh out the Miralax powder and using the gram food scale. So instead of giving like a half a cap or a full cap every other day, you can give like 5 grams of Miralax daily, and that usually helps to keep kids regular. If there's slow motility, we would recommend you with CGI. They might start erythromycin or cyproheptadine. Gas and distension, we usually say you can start a probiotic. We usually say you actually have to open it because the capsule then has carbohydrate. And you can do venting if your kid has a G-tube. Reflux is a huge side effect. Again, ketones are an acid. So we usually have to start famotidine or omeprazole, or we will recommend smaller, more frequent meals. Kidney stones. So this is another reason why the potassium citrate is so important. Kidney stones, it's about 10% of patients on a ketogenic diet do develop kidney stones. We do a screening if they're on the diet for 2 years. We'll get a renal bladder ultrasound to check for stones. If they're there, then you're going to go to our stone clinic and follow their recommendations. And then also increase hydration, which we always have like a fluid goal for families to meet on that. Growth failure. So if we are decreasing the amount of carbohydrate, you're decreasing your glucose, you're decreasing the amount of insulin you need. Insulin actually helps us to grow. So some kids do kind of not level off per se, but don't have the normal trajectory of what we would have expected for their height. We have seen as soon as a kid comes off of the diet, that actually bounces right back up. And we do have some kids who are on growth hormone and it still works fine with the diet. Vitamin deficiency is a huge thing to think about. And probably the number one reason why I would not try a ketogenic diet unless you're under the supervision of a dietitian. Supplementation is a must. You absolutely have to have supplementation. We get our vitamins and minerals from our carbohydrates. So again, if you're taking those away, you have to supplement with them. So they have different regimens of what you're on. We do lab work every 3 to 4 months for multiple reasons. This is one of them. We check like zinc, magnesium, tons of other things. And the dietitian does like a full analysis of everything of what they need. So medications in keto. So as Mary Poppins says, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. There is a ton of sugar in medication, especially the liquid medication. So if you take Keppra liquid, for example, if you had, so this would be 2.5 mLs of Keppra. It is 1,500 milligrams of carbohydrate. When we normally look at a nutrition label for carbs, they're in grams. So it'd be 1.5 gram of carb, which is a ton. If your kid is only getting 10 grams of carb per day, then they're going to be having 3 of those grams from their medication. So instead, we do switch everything over to the lowest carbohydrate form. A Keppra tablet, the same amount, only has 58 milligrams of carbohydrate, so it's significantly less. I would rather have your kid eat their carbohydrates from their food, not their medication. So we switch everything over. There are some medication considerations. So topiramate, zonisamide, acetazolamide, they're carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, so they can actually worsen metabolic acidosis. You don't necessarily have to stop those medications when you start a ketogenic diet, but you do have to be more mindful. You might have to use more potassium citrate, say. Valproic acid can have a negative effect on acidosis. It's a fatty acid, so sometimes we see the actual number of the ketosis lessen if somebody's on valproate. Steroids, so systemic steroids, they increase our glucose, they can decrease your ketones. We use them if necessary, of course, but we try to avoid them if we can. Propofol, if used for super prolonged periods, if somebody was in status, they might use that, but you really increase the risk of propofol infusion syndrome if you're on a ketogenic diet, so that's kind of something more for your team to like just know about and not use. For general quick sedation and MRIs, it's okay. What about tube feeding? So there are, fortunately, 2 brands that we use very frequently, KetoCal and KetoV. They're both readily available. They also come in different formulations. So KetoCal, I know they have a 4-to-1 ratio. They also come in like 3, 2.5, and 2-to-1. The chocolate one I tasted recently and was my favorite of all of the ones that I tried. The KetoV, the plant one was actually my favorite. So if your child has a dairy allergy, you can do the plant-based. You can also do keto if they have a dairy allergy. We have seen every single allergy and we have made it work. I think it was hard to start someone who had a vegan diet. The family adjusted for the kid and did a vegetarian diet instead, but it can definitely be done. And sometimes these are good to like supplement too if you might have like a picky eater or something. These are kind of good. Like they get a full meal just from drinking a carton of these. So to keep those on hand, even if they're not tube fed. Home monitoring. So we do home monitoring pretty frequently in the beginning when starting a ketogenic diet, and then less frequently over time. So there are a few different ketone and glucose monitors on the market, but we do require like the finger sticks. And then we check urine. We actually check the pH, ketones, and if there's any blood in the urine, because that could actually possibly catch a kidney stone. And we usually do that monitoring weekly. Tons of other uses for ketogenic diets. There's so much coming out right now. It's moving really rapidly. There is a lot of push for bipolar disorder actually right now. It is used in autism, cancer, headaches, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, narcolepsy. There are a ton of different things out there that keto is being used for. So it's exciting to see all of this come about. And I'm hopeful that one day CHOP will offer this for kids with autism without epilepsy too. So the picky eater. So these are just some tips that I kind of thought of. These gummy bears are actually, they're homemade with those like silicone molds that you can use. Those are usually a favorite go-to. The stars are actually carrot stars, and you kind of get that crisp then. Those are a favorite. And then like little finger foods, like for the dipping, those could be really helpful. They might need smaller meals. Batch cooking can be a lifesaver if you have like a freezer just full of like keto waffles ready to go, and you know that you like they like that. Then that's always something if your child refuses the meal you've given them. A lot of families try to make their family dinner look similar to the keto meal, so you can cook all the chicken, kind of without some of the extra, and then take the keto kids aside, chicken, and then cook the rest for the family, and then make it look similar. And incorporating different food textures so it doesn't get boring. You can use fun cups, plates. We had one kid, he would only eat in the bathtub, but like whatever works. I like can't make it up. Again, not to brag, we have a keto cookbook from CHOP. It's available on Amazon. Our program is different. We use this exchange system. Everywhere else pretty much uses the keto calculator from the Charlie Foundation. You can still use these recipes accordingly, but this is all from our medical chef educator page, and they're great recipes and like tips and tricks. And then this is our keto kitchen. We have cooking classes on weekends that we offer for families. We also offer them virtually. We will also do one-on-one cooking classes. I think it's fun when we can have a teenager come in and they can actually cook with Paige. They usually have a good time doing that. Keto support, that's the number one thing that's going to make keto possible. We're very fortunate with having such a large program. We have a newsletter that goes out quarterly. I am like always matchmaking families together. I actually did a matchmaking for an STX mom and then our ENDD coordinator when they were on keto. So there's outpatient cooking classes. We are not back to having our yearly party, but hopefully this spring, just because of COVID, but we have a party, all the family comes, and it's just a fun day to come to CHOP and not go to an appointment. And then we usually have some like prepared keto food for them to have. The Charlie Foundation is the USA-based ketogenic diet foundation, and Matthew's Friends is the UK-based ketogenic diet foundation. Matthew's Friends actually has remarkable information on there. It's a really good site. Same with Charlie. Like, yeah, almost done. Crazy for Keto. Brandon was on keto when he was a child, became seizure-free. He is a senior in college. He wrote a book. He presented at the International Keto Symposium in September, and he has graciously been donating the money from it to our program. Some key takeaways. Find a keto center that has a team approach. Ask friends and relatives to help in any way they can, even if it's just like watching your kids so then you can cook or teaching them how to cook. Look into support for siblings. Contact the school before starting and ask about accommodations. And make sure you have your medications in the lowest carbohydrate form. Talk to your team about starting potassium citrate before going on keto. And side effects can be managed on keto. You just need to kind of work through them. And we started our 1,000th kid on a ketogenic diet this past August. And then this is Dr. Helbig. I can't believe he let me use this. He is dressed as Ted Lasso for Halloween. And this summer at a Syngapian post $1 million bike ride party, he just said, just do it for keto. And that's kind of what I have too. If you're hesitant, just try it. We say give it a 3-month try. If it doesn't work, you come off. This is our treatment team. We are very fortunate. We have a huge team. We have our medical director. We have 3 dietitians, 2 keto nurses, our coordinator, social worker. We're very lucky, I realize. And then thank you to our ENDD team as well.
Thank you, Sarah. If anybody has questions for Sarah, please find her separately. And as we have our next panel come up, I would like to ask you, first I'll tell you, Sarah, thank you, I'm sorry. Do you know that we have set a world record this week? I mean, unofficially, but we have 68 families represented of SYNGAP caregivers. That's insane. Congratulations, us. And we also have people watching on Zoom live. We will have this recorded and available for anybody to access anytime. So congratulations, everyone. Okay, next question. Can anybody guess how many, I did this last year, can anybody guess how many countries of families we have represented today? How many? Guess. Give me a guess. 8, 14, 10, no, 16. Mike, you said 16? All right, come get some swag. Okay. All right, and now do we have Virginie as our next? Thank you. Virginie is going to introduce our next panelists.
Is Paul? All right, so we have a great panel coming up on patient data and registries. I think you've seen yesterday a lot of the slides with data. And today we've asked you to go and sign up for Ciitizen, sign up for Simon, sign up for RareX. And you're lucky because here you have the best of the best. You have Dr. Wang from Simon's Searchlight, Elli Brimble from Ciitizen, and Vanessa Vogel-Farley with RareX. And they're all going to explain what their program is about and share some data, I believe. So this is a great panel, and if you have any questions and still don't know why you need to sign up, if you get out of here not knowing and you haven't signed up, I will be really mad. Mike will be mad. Corey will chase you down. So ask all the questions. This is the time. You have the experts on stage. This is very important. Without the data, there's no research. So thank you, guys. I'm going first. You're going first. Okay. Oh, you have the... No, she needs the mic. You need the mic.
This doesn't work? Okay. Is this a clicker? Okay. First of all, just a huge amount of appreciation and gratitude for being here and being welcomed into the SRF family. I'm very excited and honored to share with you about the incredible progress this community has made with the Ciitizen platform. And so my goal today is to share with those who are new a little bit more about what Ciitizen is, talk through some of the questions that we can start asking of data when it's compiled and comprehensive and rich, and then share a little bit about some of the exciting progress that has been made so far. So for those of you who are not familiar with Ciitizen, we really think of ourselves as a platform that's intended to serve individuals and families living with rare and complex disorders. And the way that we go about that work is to help enable organizations like this one to bring new therapies to patients faster, and faster being the key word. To be honest, the second one is still a work in progress, but it is going to be a focus for us this year. But how do we start to better leverage the information that we're collecting to make a difference in your lives in the here and now? So hopefully we'll see some good progress there this year. Ciitizen is a two-sided platform. On the left side, we have all of the types of information that we're able to ingest with the goal of collecting and centralizing that information in a single place. We start with medical records, so all of that rich data that lives in the records coming from each of those times you're interacting with the healthcare system. But we can also ingest genomic information, imaging, so things like brain MRIs, EEG tracings, surveys can be administered on the platform, and we can also connect our information with other types of data sources like claims information. Most importantly, in the center, we have the patients and we have communities. So everything that we do is with patient consent. You can use the platform for your own care, but if you're interested in participating in research, you can consent to do so. On the right side is who are the users of that data? Who is going to make something with the information that we're collecting? So first, for the most part today, it's really the top three. So we create partnerships with industry who are developing new therapeutics and need this clinical data to understand how they can design effective clinical trials. We also partner closely with advocacy groups like this one to provide data so that we know how to better serve the community and the patients who are a part of that community. And then research institutions. So really the goal is that the data is not siloed in any one place, but it can flow freely between these different entities. And then over time, we hope that we can build in more support for care teams and clinicians, again, with this goal of better serving you in the here and now.
In terms of how we work today, a lot of our focus is on translating all of that information that is inside your medical records into a usable data set for research. So first, as a patient, you would come to the platform and sign up. You can consent to share your de-identified data with researchers. We will go out and collect all of your medical records using your own HIPAA right of access. And importantly, we're not partnering with a single institution or a single EMR. We will actually go to every single place that you've been seen. On average, this is about 6 different institutions per patient, but we've had some families in this community where I believe we were up to like 60 different institutions that we were collecting from. We have both machine learning and human processes in place to transform that information into a structured output. And one statistic I just wanted to call out is, when we think about the value of Ciitizen, we've really focused on how do we work with that unstructured text. So looking at things like the history that the physician is taking or their assessment or the results of the physical exam. That content is so important and it represents over 80% of your medical records. And so we really felt like we needed a way to make use of that particular data. In terms of the scope of data that we capture, we look at phenotypes, so descriptors of how you're doing overall. So this could be things like diagnoses, developmental milestones, seizure history. We look at diagnostics, so EEGs, genetic testing, laboratory results, any other workup that you might have had done either as part of your own diagnostic odyssey or as you continue to manage symptoms over time. And then importantly, we look at interventions. So what medications are people taking? What surgeries are common? How often are people being hospitalized? And we use this to try to understand outcomes in the context of what individuals are doing. Can we start to see trends of what is helpful and what is not helpful? I did want to take a quick moment to talk through privacy. I am not a parent, but I can imagine as a parent, it's a lot of responsibility to think through how do you honor your child's information and protect its security. And I do want to emphasize that this is an area of huge importance and a main priority for us. So when you share your data with researchers, that data is de-identified, meaning that we remove common identifiers. And in our contracts, we actually ask researchers and industry that they promise not to make attempts to re-identify that information. We also compare the scope of research that's proposed to the original language that you consented to. And so we make sure that everything is aligned, that the research being proposed doesn't go outside of the consent that you've already provided. Every research protocol that we use undergoes an ethics review. And then in terms of security, internally Ciitizen is doing this already, but researchers also have to commit to the secure storage and transfer of the data as well. We've put a lot of thought into this, and so if you have any questions about this, just let us know and we can connect you with the right people to answer those questions. So switching gears a little bit, I'm going to talk about some of the incredible success that SRF has made. To date, since the start of our partnership, we have 192 complete data summaries for individuals with a SYNGAP1 related disorder. That data is ready to go for research and industry partnerships today. We have a pretty good distribution across the United States with representation in almost every state. And then when we start to look at the volume of information that we're collecting, you can see that over time, we have almost 400,000 pages of medical records collected for this community, averaging almost 3,000 pages per individual on the platform. In terms of data, that translates into more than 70,000 individual data points generated, about 360 per participant. When we look at the spread of what that data entails, you're going to notice that a lot of it is around phenotyping. So 24,000 phenotypic annotations, 2,356 seizure histories. So this is looking at seizure counts and seizure types, 3,400-ish exam findings, almost 10,000 vital signs, over 10,000 milestones. In terms of medications, we've annotated almost 12,000 medication interactions for this cohort, and you can see about 3,500 diagnostic procedures with a few other categories that are smaller. We have pretty good representation of different variant types. We know there's particular interest in getting to understand what those missense variants are doing better. We have good representation on the platform there. And then this kind of, is relatively simple. There was a lot more sophisticated and impressive work done yesterday, but I wanted to start to share some of the ways that we can interrogate this data to answer research questions, both broad and around the idea of identifying novel therapeutics, but also what are some of the pieces of information that might be helpful to the community today. So one of the most important things about the Ciitizen data set is that because we're capturing information over the lifespan, we can actually map key events to specific times. So we could look at the most common diagnoses overall, for example, but we can also narrow in on specific time points. So what are the most common symptoms that people are presenting with? And are there specific combinations of those things that should make someone think about SYNGAP and shorten that diagnostic odyssey? We can also start to characterize seizures. For better or worse, this is contentious. Seizures are probably going to be an important endpoint in any clinical trial that's designed for SYNGAP. And so we want to make sure that we're maximizing the design of that trial to really capture seizures as a phenotype. So we can look at the onset of seizures in our data. About half of people will have seizure onset by the age of 3. And we can also look at seizure frequency. So on this heat map on the right hand, if you have a score that's higher, so closer to the top of the page, that translates to someone who's experiencing more seizures versus someone on the lower end of the chart, which would be seizure freedom. So we can see that even in individuals who are on many medications, they continue to have almost daily seizures. And so who are those individuals and how can we better serve them? And then lastly, we do look at information related to developmental milestones, both when they are attained and also in settings of regression, when might they be lost and what milestones may be more likely to be lost during a period of regression. It is possible that milestones may be an endpoint in a clinical trial and would likely be explored, and so we wanted to be able to complement that data. So lots and lots of information. This is really only the tip of the iceberg. And really, that's not quite where we're focusing. Our goal is really to make sure that data can flow. And so because of the incredible partnerships and network that this community has created, this data is really moving. This is a very exciting slide for us as a company because it illustrates exactly what we're trying to achieve, which is that we have this critical partnership with SRF, and we have this common data set that this community has created, and it has gone on to power 7 different studies. So we have 3 industry partners who are actively using this data to develop clinical trials for SYNGAP. And then on the right-hand side, we have this incredible research team. And I do want to make a quick comment that they're all women, so that's also amazing. But they are doing incredible things with this data to supplement either other projects that they have ongoing or as sort of a sole source of information to start interrogating. This is a huge accomplishment for the community. We're so grateful to be a part of it. And please let me know if you have questions. We're here to be of service. So thank you.
It'll come up. All right, sounds good. Hi guys, I'm Vanessa Vogel-Farley. I am the Research, Data Governance, Data Analytics Lead for RareX, which is a program from Global Genes. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about what RareX does, how we complement things like Simon's Searchlight and Ciitizen, and also to show you some data. Because we do have a bunch of SYNGAP patients who are part of our data collection already. There's 89 families who are represented, and there we go. Okay, and I want to show you what SYNGAP data can show us and how to make sure your family and your data represents, the data that we're seeing represents your family. All right, so like I said, RareX is the research program for Global Genes, and Global Genes' mission is to support the next generation of advocacy. You guys are already really part of that generation. You guys are here, you're listening to research, you're participating in research, you're connecting with each other and advocating for your children in better clinical care, research, and clinical trials. So we want to be a big supporter of that in every way, shape, and form for both the foundation as well as you guys as parents and families. So we do that through access, enablement, and equity, where we have programs in support, education, and research. And really what I'm going to focus on today is that research aspect. So I want to start out by meeting the team. So none of us can do this alone. You guys know this. So I want to just show you when you contact RareX, you're contacting people. And similar to Elli's team, a lot of us are women. Actually, almost all of us are women. So when you contact us, these are the kind of people you're going to be interacting with. First, we have our CEO, Charlene Sun-Rigby, who is here somewhere and who's an STXBP1 parent. Myself, and then we have Carmen Trupek, who's the Senior Director of Scientific Programs, and we have a new partner on our team, Zore, and she's joining us as another Senior Director of Research. And these are the ladies that you're going to be talking to a lot in the next year. So, ladies and gentlemen, never mind, we do have a couple men on our staff. So Kelly Wentworth is our clinical research coordinator, and T. Shad is our other clinical research coordinator. As things move forward with the CHOP partnerships, you're going to be hearing from these women a lot. They're going to help you when you're going to your natural history studies visits. They're going to be helping you when you create your data before you go to those visits. So those researchers have that data before you get there. And then afterwards following up in case there's any holes in there. And really, these people are wonderful. They pick up the phone, they'll set a Zoom up with you, they'll email kind of anytime. So just let us know. These are, they're wonderful, they're here for you. They want to make these visits and these research participations really easy. So please reach out. And then we've got Tina Dang, who's our research associate, who heads up our genetic curation. When you upload your genetic report to the RareX data system, she's the one that leads that team. Ugo is one of our data analytics team members, and then Jade is another data analytics team member. So all of the graphs that you're going to see, I'm going to give lots of props to Jade because she made them all. And then here's our community engagement team. When you have a problem logging on or something like that, a password problem, or you have recommendations, this is our support team that when you reach out, Bridget or Caitlin or Megan are going to be the ones that are going to be responding to you. So if you have hey, this is a funny worded question, or I need to add my kid and I don't know how, or I'm not seeing a survey that we think is supposed to be on there, this is the team that you're going to reach out to and they're going to respond back to you. So I always want to put the faces with the names. So. All right, so I want to remind you guys that the RareX data collection model is a platform-based, meaning that we are an all-comer study. Anybody who can find RareX is able to enroll in RareX and provide research-grade data from day one. So we want to provide support for N-of-1 patient groups that are just starting, all the way to groups like yours who are really at the forefront of being able to collect and connect research data. And so we support all these individual communities, patient communities like SYNGAP, and then also disease consortia where you share different etiologies of your disorder. Maybe it's like sleep, I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit, or maybe some GI issues, or maybe a synaptopathy. So we want to be able to support those things to be able to look across different diseases and do the comparisons where you might find answers in a very similar disease group, but maybe not in yours. So, the participants flow, like your experience in the data collection model, is we start with that consent and data sharing preferences, similar to what Ciitizen does. And actually, we talked a lot to Ciitizen when we created this. When you start with the consent, making sure that you know what you're consenting to. The purpose of RareX at that first piece is to collect data, to share it. It's a weird consent because usually for research, we're going to collect data, and we're going to do all these analyses and the really cool things, and we're going to get an answer. That's usually what you see. But in this, we want to collect data. The data is going to be shared, and that's the whole purpose of it. So really, when you read that consent, that's really what you want to do, and then how you share it is the other parts of the consent. The data sharing preferences are an interesting aspect where usually when you sign a consent, you're saying how you want your data shared. We actually changed that a little bit. We want you guys to say where your data can be shared, whether it's to a biomedical company or this type of researcher, or maybe a different type of researcher. So you're going to go into data sharing preferences that said, oh, I want my data to go everywhere in the moon, or maybe just biomedical research, or maybe I don't want it to be part of commercial entities yet. And you can always change that. So how we really want you to do is that's a dynamic process, and we use it all the time. What I do is I email, hey, we've got a researcher who's interested. Just make sure your data sharing preferences are aligned with this research question, just to make sure that we're able to share it in that way. So we constantly kind of communicate with our participants to make sure that when these opportunities come forward, they say, just make sure you check it, because if you want to be part of this opportunity, you just need to change this for us. Then you go into the demographics and role, like the regular stuff that you would do for most research, but then you go to the head-to-toe survey. The little bit of difference that RareX brings forward is that we are disease agnostic. Meaning, we don't really know what's really relevant to SYNGAP yet, right? We know a lot about SYNGAP. A lot of it's been characterized. But as your kiddos get older, what does adulthood look like in SYNGAP? What things onset maybe later on in life? So what we do is we stay very, very agnostic. You're able to say, yeah, my kid's got something up with their skin. I don't know if it has anything to do with SYNGAP. You know, they got purple spots on their nails. Again, I don't even know if it has anything to do with SYNGAP, but you're able to put it in here's research data. The cool part is maybe today it's you with purple, your child's nails with purple spots, but maybe tomorrow it's going to be your child's, and then your child's, and then you have like a signal to say like, well, something's going on with these kids' nails. What is it? And it might be related to SYNGAP. So it gives us an ability to say, what are you guys experiencing from your child's head to toe, and what things might be onsetting later on in life that maybe are not characterized in SYNGAP yet. And then what we do is then it branches off things like if you say, yep, my child has nail issues, it opens up additional surveys that are related to those aspects. Additionally, the big thing that comes into the space is quality of life. A lot of times when we talk about research, we're wanting to know about clinical care, we're wanting to know about symptoms, about phenotypes, about those sorts of things. But we also want to know how it affects your quality of life, both the patient themselves as well as your caregivers. So there's a bunch of quality of life measures on there as well that ask about how things are affecting your child and then you as well. I talked about the branching logic already, but so basically head to toe, and then it'll open those different survey levels based upon what you answer yes to. The additional piece is that we do have some standardized assessments that maybe you've done someplace else. I'll say the Vineland, because I'm guessing a lot of you know what the Vineland is, because you've probably done it quite a few times. We have that available on our platform, and sometimes people groan, like they're like, oh, I just did this. The good part is, based upon the fact that we do data connection and sharing, we can take different Vinelands from different time points. So say you did it for Simon's 6 months ago, and then you did it for, Ciitizen pulled a Vineland from a clinician visit 2 years ago. We can take all those and put them together and develop a timeline and use that data in more of a longitudinal way, because that's one of the things that we're really doing is making sure we're connecting those data sets on the backside to be able to use that way. So sometimes when you come across something that you've said, oh, I've done this before, just know that the ability that SRF is really pushing us forward to collaborate and connect data. That's why. Like, we want to make sure that we're not losing any of those data points and we're connecting in a way that's useful to you guys. All right, the other thing is feedback. Once you get onto the system, there's things that you guys see as parents and like people who are interacting with the system that we don't, right? We're so close to it, we're like, no, this looks great, it's perfect. Please let us know if you see something weird, or like, hey, maybe this is a good place to put another, another example of something. So let us know. Email research, support. Again, it's Bridget, Caitlin, myself. We all see them come in, and we sit down and we say, okay, this came back as feedback. Should we implement it? How do we want to implement it? Or kind of, do we need to add it to the roadmap? So please let us know. We always want to hear your feedback, because really this is a patient-reported platform, and so we want to make sure you're able to report what you want. All right. So types of inquiries that we usually get: login issues, document upload and downloads, adding patients and caregivers, and the different consents, the surveying, branching, and logic if it doesn't work or it does, and then just the general data collection platform feedback. So please reach out. We're always here to listen about those sorts of things. All right, so let's get to the data. So this is data as of, I think she pulled it on the 27th, so this is really hot off the presses. And like I said, 89 families are enrolled. This is representing the 45 that have the most complete data in it, okay? Now, I'm gonna be a little bit interactive with you guys, because the cool part is, RX is agnostic to disorder, right? So we support 89 disease communities. What we need to find in these areas is we need you guys to say, this is representing my family, this is really resonating with me. And some of the other, there's actually some cool, like, I want to talk about it, or I want you guys to tell me about it, is there's these little signals that we're getting in some of these areas in the SYNGAP place that we need some explanation as to what it means, or what it could mean clinically or treatment-wise, okay? So I'm gonna stop on some of these slides and let you kind of look at them. And I'll do a little bit of explanation, but then I'm gonna ask a couple questions. Or if something strikes you, please raise your hand and say, like, that's my kid, or whatever it is. But please, I want your feedback. I want to say, like, that makes sense to me, or maybe this is going on there, okay? All right, first, Assignments. So like we said, once you complete your head to toe, you start getting assigned surveys that are for you. And so this is just a list of the completed assignments. Generally, we want to be around the 75% range. We want everybody who has that survey in their dashboard to be 75% of you to have finished it. Obviously, blood and bleeding, there's actually not a whole lot of blood and bleeding issues in SYNGAP, so everybody who has it on their dashboard has completed it. Yay. But as you kind of go down, you'll see that those percentages go down. So once in a while, you'll get an email from me or Zore or one of the patient engagement teams and say, hey, let's do a push to get your medication and supplement use over to 75, right? So if you haven't done it, let's get that to 75. And then we'll email you again and say, you got it to 75. So we'll do little pushes in community engagement that way. And we work with the foundations too to make sure that they're kind of supporting us on this. Or say there's like some conference coming up and they have something that they're interested in at that time. We can say, what do you want us to make sure you have data for, right? So this is the survey completion. So again, we want to keep it like 75%. So if you have something on your dashboard that you haven't filled out, like we want to push it up there. But we do give that feedback to say, like, these are complete and this is what we're looking for. All right, so head to toe. 56 people have completed the head to toe, and you can say yes, no, and unsure. And when we say you have issues in this domain, it doesn't need to be diagnosed. It can be mother's or father's intuition. It could be a caregiver said, like, there's something going on. But you can say, just have you recognized this in your child or your adult? And so as you can see, the top part of this is pretty standard. You kind of know in SYNGAP, there's brain and nervous system issues, there's developmental issues, there's behavior and psych, there's sleep issues in all NDDs. I don't know how you parents do this for the sleep is really, really awful. Muscles and digestive system. But then as you go down, you're gonna kind of see these are the little ones. These like the N of ones, or like just a couple of you in this room have reported those. But that's really the cool part. When you're starting to see one or two people start having symptoms in those areas, then we can really kind of push down and drill down to say, is this a SYNGAP thing, or maybe it's something else going on in that patient. All right, so we're talking about brain and nervous system first. So as you can see for SYNGAP, cognitive impairment is pretty prevalent. So everybody said yes and 2 people said unsure. Again, the top half of this is totally understood, right? But then you get down to memory impairment. How many people in this room who have a SYNGAPian think their kid has memory issues? Okay, explain that to me. Why do you think they have memory issues? Give me an example or story.
Just because it's hard for him to follow, say, a 2-step instruction. So if you say, go grab your coat and then grab your shoes on the way to grab your coat, he will be distracted by a book or something that he likes, and then kind of just start doing something else and not remember that he was going to get his coat and put on his shoes.
Does that resonate with any of the other parents that said their kid has memory issues?
Can I just do a quick follow-up as the partner, right?
Yep.
Us in the same household. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking of how could I give feedback to help? I think the opposite, right? I'm definitely in the unsure category because maybe there's a place where we stopped and got him food 2 years ago, and we drive by it again, and all he can do is sit there and point it. So I think a short-term, right? A short-term, long-term memory might help the data points be a little more accurate.
So here's the funny part. Here's the rub about memory issues. I heard exactly those two same things from 2 other parents when we were talking about this when I was at that table. Here's the very, very interesting part. You as a parent, everyday life, that seems like a memory thing, right? He can't follow directions, right? He's not remembering what I told him to do. Generally, what you're talking about is processing. It's not memory. He's not forgetting to do what you asked him to do. The way that his brain processes that information is different, or it's executive functioning or attention. But it comes across as memory. The cool thing is the other stuff that SYNGAP is doing in these like neurons, and we hear about neurons and iPSCs and mouse models and all that other crazy stuff that Mike talks about on his podcast very emphatically, I might add, it actually shows that memory impairment that you're seeing in the kids is more towards that processing. It's the neurons that you're seeing, that when you're talking about those neurons in a dish, that they're different. That's what you're more seeing. That's what you're talking about with the processing. Your neurons are not firing the same. So the cool part about us seeing memory impairment, yes, but now we know, based upon SYNGAP, if somebody says yes to memory impairment, we probably should open up things about executive functioning questions or processing questions because it might get a little bit more towards, it's not memory, but it's a processing issue.
I was just going to add that it also comes and goes. Some days my daughter can add 2 digits and carry, and then other days she can't. And I'll be told your daughter was off today. So it comes, and then a week later, and you have to continually scaffold and teach, but a week later she's like, of course I got this.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
And the thing is, like, we want the purpose of RX is to be like parent reported. We like those weird like signals that we want to be able to pick up, and you say like the parents able to say it, because then when you're going to the Simon's visits and when you're going to like when they're looking into the EHRs where it's actually clinician or researcher data, they can find some more signal in there, right? They can back that up and say, why are they off? Is it medication? Like there was a medication change in their EHR, or was it something else going on in their life that was like maybe just a transitional time in their life? So all of these things kind of taken together to answer like, why is she off? Was it a medication thing? Could it have been like during cycle or whatever it is? So I'm going to move on to one other one that's interesting in this. Headaches and migraines. There is a lot of unsure in this, right? And so what kind of things are you seeing? So anybody who's in here who's reported or thinks their child has migraines, what are you seeing that you think it's a migraine?
He is well, not constantly, but quite frequently he's rubbing his head and with his hands like something's hurting or pitting. So I don't think it's sensory. I think it's something is really hurting him.
Interesting. Okay.
But he's nonverbal, so.
Yep.
And he cannot communicate. I don't feel good.
So the cool part about these sorts of things is where you're able to give information on that. And the unsure is actually just as telling as the yes or the no, right? Because those sorts of things, like we can ask, what are you seeing that you're doing that? Because then when you're going to see Dr. Helbig or you're going in these spaces, he can follow up on that and be like, are these kids actually having migraines, or is it something else that might be more similar? Because maybe he saw another SYNGAP kid who's doing the same thing, but they figured out it was a reaction to something. So it's one of those cool,
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what she said, because Jaden is a little more verbal, and she's 20, and so she actually will say, oh, head hurt, and I have migraines, so I don't know that it's necessarily something that is SYNGAP related, because actually my 15-year-old just had his first classical migraine a couple of weeks ago, so it is like hereditary for us. I've never really attributed it as part of SYNGAP, but she will say her head hurts, and she will have photosensitivity. The lights are bothering her. She has to be in a dark room. She wants ice. Just naturally, she knows what she needs with that. So I'm pretty certain she is having actual classical migraines, but I don't know if they're attributed to SYNGAP or not.
and that's one of the other things. Like some of these things might not be attributed to SYNGAP. It might just be how kids develop, right? Some kids have migraines, some kids don't. But it's that kind of again, the signal to noise. When is it coming out? When can it be attributed to that diagnosis or the genetic change? And when can it be just like it's part of just the normal distribution of populations? So I'm going to move on because I do have a bunch more data slides that, again, I'm just going to I got 3 minutes. So I'm just going to keep going on this. But again, I will send this around to you guys. I'll send it to everybody who's enrolled that you can get the slideshow and you can take a look at it. But again, it changes every day. But the cool part is GI stuff. I know you guys all literally deal with poop and poop problems so much for different reasons. So again, these things are ringing true. Feeding difficulties, constipation, defecation issues usually withholding, stomach issues and dysmotility. Seizures and NDD. So we're using the Pediatric Epilepsy Learning Healthcare System questionnaire. We modulated it for a patient-reported aspect, so it's actually the parents giving that information. And so this is ORCA. I'm sorry, this is the communication scale. But you can kind of see the communication that you're seeing in a lot of kids are using gestures and sounds as their primary mode of communication, and then the AAC devices. So you're giving an idea of what SYNGAP is using for communication and what's the best kind of options for in that area. Then, this is the epilepsy one. So we've adapted this to kind of see what's being presented that, again, the clinicians are going to be able to see because they're doing it in some of the other clinics to say, is it the same thing? Are the parents reporting the same types of seizures that we're seeing, right? So, that's the other thing that the clinicians will say it's this type of seizure and maybe a parent seeing a different type of seizure at home. So it's another way to be able to do that. And how many SYNGAP kids are having seizures. Then we're talking about current epilepsy syndromes. Again, what kind of syndromes exist? Lots of comorbid diagnoses like Lennox-Gastaut or DOE syndrome. Those things when you go into the clinician and they're like, oh, now they have West syndrome. And you're like, well, what the heck does that mean? It's a different type of epilepsy. Lots of kids have multiple kinds. This is a kind of an interesting one for parents to see as we're giving you more information. How frequent are the seizures, and then seizure onset? So like the frequency and the onset are really the most common questions in parent spaces. Like, I have my kid's 3. When maybe should I expect the other shoe to drop and my kids start having seizures? So that's the other thing, that giving information about your experience where your child has seizures or the frequency is really important for the kind of the next generation coming up. All right. This is the aberrant behavior checklist. A lot of, like, again, that second one, the behavior and psychiatric issues were big. This is kind of describing what kind of impairments and the different behaviors that you're seeing in SYNGAP. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we add different things. So RAREX is constantly growing and changing, and both in ways that we take things back because, you know, either it's not working for the patient groups that are out there or we need additional information. So what we do in these areas is we add things, we remove things, we analyze things. So every time you get an email saying there's a new version of something or there's a new survey on there, it's because we're honing in on some of the things that we're adding. So we're adding a new survey, maybe we've talked to the clinicians, maybe we've done some research, and we're like, we need to add this new survey because we're seeing there's, you know, attention issues or there's memory issues. So you're constantly going to be kind of like emailed by the system as we're doing changes. If you're ever wondering why, just email me. Email one of the team members. They can be like, oh, this is why we did this, because we have lots of working groups in the background, but we don't want to overwhelm you guys with all that information. Genetic reports, this is a big thing. Researchers really, really, really want to see a verified genetic report for SYNGAP. So there's a place to do that and upload it, and it gets curated, and that does travel with your data. It comes out of EHRs as well. So you can get it from Ciitizen if you want to upload it there, and vice versa. For a good thing, we were part of the Open Science Data Challenge, the SYNGAP group was, and during that we actually just connected the data directly with the Ciitizen data. So your genetic reports that are in Ciitizen, it was connected to your RAREX data in a de-identified linker way. All right, how to do this? Again, I'll send this to you guys. It's pretty easy to upload the documents. And then we have lots of surveys coming up. So we have 57 surveys focused on like neuromuscular issues or neurodegeneration issues that are going to be there for implementation. Not all of them are going to show up in your stuff. That's why the branch chain logic is really important. Unless you say your child has a neuromuscular issue, you're not going to see all of them. Or unless you said your child has regression or degeneration, you're not going to see all of them. It's just one of the ways we show how we're constantly upgrading and expanding our areas. And then additionally, we're actually adding, we always had primary working groups that are working on these next steps. As we have a primary immune deficiency working group working right now, sleep-related disorders, because I saw lots of you guys have sleep-related issues. And then again, expansion of the other domains into the adult onset space too. So, re-engagement, I talked to one of the leaders and they said kind of in the past, maybe SYNGAP has kind of stepped back a little bit, lots of things going on. So in the next year, we're gonna work together with your organization to like re-engage, make sure that we're getting the best overlap as possible in your community. So you might be getting more emails or you might be seeing some more social media posts from the foundation. All right, and an opportunity to connect and engage with Global Genes and RAREX specifically. We have a rare disease drug development symposium coming up in late April in Philadelphia. All right.
Thank you, Vanessa. This is working. Those of you who were awake and in the room before 8:30 already heard me introduce myself. For those who weren't, my name is Paul Wang. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician by training. Used to work with a lot of families like yours who had kids with genetic diagnoses and neurodevelopmental disabilities. I went from CHOP, actually, where I was back then, into industry, have a background in big pharma at Pfizer and at Seaside Therapeutics, which Mike Tranfalio mentioned in the Fragile X story. And for the last 7 years, I've been at the Simons Foundation. My time is short. I'm not going to go through all of my too many slides. Let me just start with a brief introduction to the foundation. Simons Foundation was created by Jim and Marilyn Simons, who in many ways are like you guys. They really value their privacy, but I can say that they have family reasons for being very, very interested in neurodevelopmental disabilities and when those disabilities result from genetic conditions. They're different from, I think, everybody in the room in that they made a lot of money, and so like a lot. So they created the foundation, which really broadly funds research in math and science, but a little corner of the foundation is focused on autism, neurodevelopmental disabilities, and the genetic conditions that have been related to NDD. And honestly, I don't think it's bragging. It's not work that I did. It's a lot of the work that this whole group did before I joined that figured out, oh, these genes are really, really important, among them SYNGAP1. So the little corner of the foundation that focuses on NDDs we call Safari, because originally it started just with autism, Simon Foundation Autism Research Initiative. You see in the second column Searchlight, which is what I'm mainly going to be talking about. In the fourth column, you just see that gray box, funding for outside researchers. It was really interesting to hear the summary from JR and Pavel this morning about the scientists who spoke to you guys, at least some of you guys yesterday in the forum here yesterday. We have funded Dr. Wilsey, Dr. Hugenier, Dr. Rumbaugh, Dr. Fraser, Dr. April Levin, not Levine, she pronounces it Levin. All of them we have funded. Sometimes not for their SYNGAP specific research, but those projects helping to build their labs, we like to think has contributed to the SYNGAP work as well. The other thing that we do, and I'm sorry I actually don't have it on this slide, is that we connect researchers with the SYNGAP community when they want to recruit you, when they want to ask you, will you participate in our new study? So we call that our Research Match platform, and I know that Dr. Tom Fraser has used that to help recruit for his eye-tracking remote assessment of learning and language comprehension, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really proud of that as well. We think it's really important to make a contribution. Jim and Marilyn Simons really was their aim to make sure to help make it happen, that these conditions become better understood. And we're proud to say that from the Simon Searchlight results, from those data, there have been 88 research papers published. Certainly not all on SYNGAP, but and certainly not all that there are going to be. But we know that it's already making a difference. I was one slide too early because I have that 88 articles published in the bottom left here. So what Searchlight does, a lot of overlap, no question, with the efforts from RareX and Ciitizen as well. Collect that detailed data about you and your children, the medical behavioral histories. We do blood sampling. That's happening outside today. And I know that Mike has talked with all of you guys about how important that is, so I know you've heard that message. We synthesize the information, provide it back to you. I'm going to show you on a later slide. 4 times a year, every 3 months, we update the results that we have, all the data that we have on SYNGAP specifically, and then all the other conditions, and we post an update on our websites. We freely share the data that we have with qualified researchers, whether they come from industry or from academia. The connecting, I already told you about the Research Match platform and the articles that have been published. So we focus on, I think there are about 170 conditions here, because all of these have been associated with neurodevelopmental disabilities. SYNGAP in the blue box is one of them. I think you have probably also heard this message recently, that the genes that are associated with NDDs tend to fall into some big categories, and one of the big categories is genes that affect function of the synapse. The synapse is a connection between neurons. And SYNGAP, obviously from the name, you know, is one of them. And we like to think that actually studying other synaptic genes that are related to NDDs is also going to result in information that's going to be helpful to this community specifically. And learning about SYNGAP is going to help those other communities as well. We're international in scope for Searchlight. We actually now have available all of our assessments you can see in the languages that are there. I don't know why Dutch. It's not so many people, but we're happy to have it in Dutch. So what do we have in Searchlight? So here's the flow of where we're at. 168 families, thank you, have signed up online. 139 have provided that genetic lab report so that we can verify and see usually what specific variant is affecting your child. 89 have shared data on their medical history. Slightly more than that have filled out other surveys. And we've actually gotten blood from 40, which is fantastic. This is just an illustration of all the different variants that are represented in the people who are participating in Searchlight. I'm not a molecular biologist. I'm no expert on all of this, but we know it's really important to get all of these, including, and Mike spoke to it earlier this morning when he talked about the missense variants and how important it is to have representation from the missense as opposed to the so-called PTV, protein truncating variants, where basically you don't get any of the protein. one of the things that we do that I think is unique is that we make iPSCs. We make those induced pluripotent stem cell at no cost to SRF, at no cost to the families, of course. And so we have tried to make 7 different lines. Unfortunately, it's not always successful. For those who don't have a background in this area, this is amazing that you can take somebody's blood and then sort of like reverse develop it. It's like Brad Pitt in Benjamin Button. You can like take it back in time to where it is like a stem cell which can become any other cell. It's so amazing. They gave a Nobel Prize for this, and it wasn't so long ago. It was in the 2010s. It's amazing work. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. We try really hard. We don't do it in our own labs. There's something called New York Stem Cell Foundation that does this work. And so we've helped to fund them to do it. We have succeeded with 3 lines. You can see them, lines 1, 3, and 7 here. And the stars represent the 7 different researchers who have requested and been given these stem cell lines at a nominal cost. I think it's shipping $120 to them. So we're really happy that we've been able to do that. And of course, what makes it all the more valuable is that we have data on what these kids are like, where the cells came from. So the researchers can connect the stem cells and how they are acting with actual data on what a person with that particular mutation is like. So we know how those mutations are affecting those people. Just a brief word on stem cells. I think you guys have a podcast on this where Mike or other people are explaining it. What's amazing is that you reverse develop them down to the stem cell, and then the researchers can forward develop them into like any other kind of cell in the body, including neurons. And that's really important because we want to study what a human neuron is like when it has these particular mutations. And that's really the only way you can do it, because you're not going to do a brain biopsy on your kids to like grab a neuron out of their brain to study it. So instead we do it like this. Take the blood, reverse develop it into a stem cell, and then forward develop it into a neuron to see what happens when that mutation is present. You can also create other things. You can make a liver cell, a kidney cell, you can make blood cells, etc. So, and it was really nice to hear Vanessa talking about this. We don't think SYNGAP effects are limited to only the brain. So there's the potential there to also look at other cells in the body and how they're affected by the particular variant that your child might have. This is just to remind me, I already mentioned at the bottom, New York Stem Cell Foundation. They're the ones actually doing the work. And the cost of creating these stem cell lines is shared by ourselves, Simon Foundation, and the Nancy Lurie Marks Family Foundation. Just in case you're a football fan, the Lurie name, that's the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm quite sure that they also have money going to Dr. Helbig's lab and all of the other work at CHOP. So again, I have too many slides. I'm not going to go through all of this. I see it's 11:53, and you guys might have some questions at the end. This is just a profile of the age of all the people who have given us answers to the surveys. In the first column, you see there's about 18 whose kids are 0 to 4 years old, and then 25 who are 5 to 9 years old, and then some in the older age ranges as well. Seizure data, honestly, the seizure data that Ciitizen is pulling from your electronic medical records is much more detailed because it's hard for anybody to remember exactly what medicine at what dose was starting on what date and exactly which seizures were happening then. That's stuff which is really rich in the medical records because the neurologist has been recording it. So that is great data there. We know there are other neurologic symptoms as well. Low muscle tone, super common, movement disorders, other kinds of coordination problems, and diagnoses of cerebral palsy in some people. Other medical issues, and we've heard people touching on this, vision. And just with my background as a pediatrician, for sure, all of your kids should be seeing ophthalmologists, whether you think they have a vision issue or not, just to make sure there's not something there that can be easily addressed. Crossed eyes seems to be present in somewhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of all people with SYNGAP mutations. GI issues as well, and people have already touched on that. Constipation, gastroesophageal reflux, super common. Some endocrine issues. We show profiles of the medications that are being used in the SYNGAP community. Anti-epileptics, obviously the most common stuff for sleep. That's probably obvious to you guys too, that is very, very common. And then an assortment of other medications. We also administer the developmental and behavioral questionnaires. And here I'll say the efforts from RareX and from us to look at development and behavior, that's something that honestly is usually at least not that rich in the electronic health records because that's not something that gets assessed at the hospital. It might be assessed at the school. I don't know how hard it would be. I think it would be fantastic if a citizen went to all the school districts and pulled people's developmental assessments there. That would be incredible. But that's stuff that we're getting as well. Nothing new here on the slide for you guys. That there are language delays and impairments in the vast majority, intellectual disability, developmental delays in the vast majority. Autism looks like in around 2/3 of people who've responded here as well. The violence you've heard mentioned, and I just got a little data to show here. So what we're showing here is going up and down is the violence score in terms of an age equivalent. So if you have a dot where the arrow is, for example, that dot is at 4.5 or so on the y-axis. That means that that person shows expressive language at a 4.5-year-old level. Their actual age is shown across the bottom. They're about 14.5. And so I think what the graph is showing you with the limited data that we have is that, as you know, delays in language development are super, super common, almost always going to be found in SYNGAP. Overall, the trajectory is that things are going up with age. Not as fast as we would like, not as fast as you would like, but overall, abilities do increase and improve with age. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to tell you some of the other areas. Personal care skills, dressing oneself, feeding oneself, etc. Again, the line is sloping upwards, so that's the good news, but they're below where you would like them to be. We want to see our kids as independent as they possibly can be. Social development, gross motor also, sloping up over time. We collect data on the child behavior checklist as well. I'm going to skip over these slides and just come here. This is a screenshot of the quarterly update that I mentioned. We posted online. This is from, I think, October 2023. It shows data from 65 individuals with SYNGAP1. The age summary is the orange-colored triangles. Some of the developmental behavioral conditions listed next to that. GI conditions, how common they are. This is just illustrative. The actual quarterly report is longer than you see here. This is just to show you, many of you, again, thank you. You're already participants, what the dashboard looks like. We do provide an Amazon gift card to families after they complete the surveys. I know that's not your primary motivation, just a little bit of recognition for the time that you have to take to do all of this. The Searchlight team is very big. I'm actually just honestly mainly a pinch hitter today. They've done much more of the work. I only show up once in a while and get to stand on stage. So thank you to all of them, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you all. We appreciate you more than you know. I'm going to need your hands for a moment, please. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. We're going to have 1 minute for Q&A. I see 2 hands. That's what we're going to take. Is that okay with you guys? Okay.
Thanks for your time today. Very interesting. I had 2 questions. One's more of a double click on the comments around supplemental, medical adjacent records, like observation notes from therapies. I think that's a really interesting opportunity, and encourage you guys to look at that a little bit more. I don't think you need to necessarily go to schools, although that would be helpful. There's lots of other providers doing ABA, speech, OT, PT, that I think there's some definitely rich information there, and I think particularly because we're looking for behavior measures for clinical testing, I think that'd be super helpful. I'm really curious about the user interface, maybe on particularly on the Vineland, and you'd be able to see that over time, because I find myself trying to think about how did my daughter assess on that a year ago? How does she assess now? And so is that, I think RareX, I think you guys talked about that. Is that available or?
Yeah, so if your Vineland's in there and you either take it on RareX or you upload one that we curate in, you can see them over time. You can't, we could graph it for you if you wanted us to. You could just request, can I have a visualization of this, and we could do that. But you can see how it goes over time. So like if you ingest it, so you say you downloaded it from Simon's or something, and you upload it, we curate it back in, you can see yours over time. Yeah. So I'm going to be super transparent. There's just a lot of paperwork involved in that, and not like there. Yes, all of the conversations are happening. All of the ethos and the want to do it is there. But what ends up happening is like Elli talked a little bit about privacy and protocols and the consents that you sign. In order to collaborate and share data, we need to validate that that's what all of those things are in place. So that's what we're kind of doing. We're evaluating. Simon's has lots of different protocols that are in place that lots of that data is in. So we do have to go one by one to verify that, yes, we can share this data, this is how we can link it and that sort of thing. So we're doing it in small bites. Like, right, for the OSDC, we were able to do it, let's say, like proof of concept for a citizen. Can we tokenize the citizen data? Can we tokenize the RareX data and combine it? And we were able to. But we have to do it in small bits to make sure that, one, we have all the legal stuff in the background. As things move forward, there might be needs to reconsent. That's the other thing. Reconsent is like the biggest four-letter word in privacy and data governance that you ever want to say. Nobody wants to reconsent because it's such a big lift to make sure that you're getting the amount of people. So if you ever there's a big reconsent effort, that's the reason why. It's going to be towards that data connection and stuff. So just know that we are working towards it. Lots and lots of meetings, lots and lots of paperwork and lawyers and those sorts of things, evaluating that what we can and cannot do within the rights of privacy. So
one more here, I guess.
Actually, just restating the same thing. The lawyers are just worried we're going to violate your privacy.
Yeah.
That's why it's such an issue.
So your results, your statistics, your reports, analyses, they're only going to be as accurate as the data we provide, correct? So maybe, Dr. Wang, this may be a question more since you have a background in clinical practice. I would guess that we're not the only family in this room. We've had a great doctor's visit. We go in. Maybe it's the neurologist, and we're talking about the seizures. Maybe it's the psychiatrist and his behaviors. And we get home, and you read the report, and we could have even filled out the, you know where I'm going with this, with the intake perfectly. But then you read gastrointestinal issues, normal. Can you give us, as families, any advice or tips? How do we get accurate medical records, including the things that might not be the exact purpose of the visit, so when you're putting your data in, it actually reflects that accurately?
Yeah. I wish I had a great answer to your question, and I know this happens all the time. I don't have a great answer. Here's two things that are happening, or two reactions to the really important point that you're making. One is that, and I'm no expert, one is that people are saying AI is going to be applied to create more accurate medical records. Like doctors might reach a point where they're like recording and then AI is going to transcribe it and make it into the notes. So maybe that's a solution to like making sure that the actual medical records are more accurately reflect what the parents said and what the kid was doing. My other reaction is to say that the discrepancies between what parents are really seeing and what gets recorded sometimes in the records are an important reason to have both of those sources so they can complement each other. So we go directly to you guys to get your voice on the surveys. That's what we're doing, that's what RareX is doing. So you can tell us directly and we get that data directly in and then see how that compares with what was in the record.
I think I have two comments that I can add to that too. One is it's part of the reason why getting the full picture is very helpful, because if you're seeing the neurologist, their focus is going to be on seizures or what the primary reason for the visit is there versus your GI doc. And so making sure that you can connect the dots across the entire healthcare universe and create multiple pieces of evidence to support that, it's part of some of the thinking that we do around the data quality in particular. One of the favorite phrases that we have is garbage in, garbage out. So we're try to be very thoughtful around that. I do think the second piece, in terms of your question about like what can families do, I actually think this is why the access piece becomes really important, because once you have access to those records and you can see them, you can actually start flagging the discrepancies to your providers as well, which of course is more work on your part, so it's not great. But I think there wasn't really that accountability in the past, and now there is, and so I hope we continue to see improvement there.
Thank you. I'm just going to do a mic and make a comment. These are three excellent organizations that it can sound to a parent that they're doing kind of the same thing, and why are we doing the same thing multiple times? But hopefully you can tell from today that they're actually specialized in different things and have very distinct value propositions, and it's really important. We partner with them because they're excellent, and it's really important to sign up to these registries, because all of this data is critical. So thank you very much for making the time today.
Okay. I'm looking for 3. Raise your hand if in the last couple of months you have signed up for Ciitizen. Oh, that's a yay. All right. Raise your hand if you've in the last couple of months signed up for RareX. Okay. And Simon Searchlight. Yes. All right, those 3 people, please come see me at the swag table. And now, let me drop this for a second. All right, so quick update. If you haven't yet registered for the community dinner at Rodizio's Grill later tonight, we still have a couple of spots available. So use the QR code on the back of your badge. There's a link to register and sign up. You do have to pay for it, not the full amount, but pay, register, get your spot, and then you'll be able to join us tonight. And then, right now we have lunch available. Please go create a plate, bring it back. We will have a lunch and learn with behavior therapist Elli. We'll meet back in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Thank you.